Hey there, movie buffs, and welcome to another installment of the Italian-American saga. By the end of the last episode, Martin Scorsese had scored a minor hit with After Hours, a title that reinvigorated the director's passion for filmmaking. It seemed that this title of born-again indie filmmaker would dictate the direction of Scorsese's new stage in his career. But fate had other plans for the New York auteur.
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only say.
In 1986, television wasn't the profitable avenue it is today. Directors and actors resorted to television once their shelf life on the big screen had expired. There were some exceptions, of course. Some shows carried a certain pedigree or iconic status that allowed artists to overcome the smaller pay and scale associated with the small screen. Giants of the new Hollywood era were enticed by these rare opportunities. William Friedkin had directed the Twilight Zone episode, and Steven Spielberg had created and produced a short-lived anthology series titled Amazing Stories. The series included episodes directed by the likes of Joe Dante, Clint Eastwood, Tobe Hooper, and Robert Zemeckis, who helmed an episode after his groundbreaking hit, Back to the Future. Scorsese followed the suit, and in March 1986 he directed a story imagined by Spielberg himself and penned by the creator of After Hours, Joseph Minion, a great effort but miles apart from the indie image the director had become associated with just a year before. His career would take an even more commercial trajectory later that year. In 1984, Walter Tevis penned the sequel to his 1959 novel, The Hustler. The book had been adapted into a movie in 1961 starring Paul Newman. It was a critical and commercial hit, and naturally there was an interest in adapting the follow-up title, The Color of Money. And nobody was more invested in getting the production started than Newman himself. The iconic movie star reached out to Scorsese and asked him to direct the movie, against the studio's wishes. He recognized Scorsese's talent and reputation as a filmmaker and felt that the director's unique vision would provide a modern and dynamic take on the story and complete the Fast Eddie's character arc. The Mean Streets director was conflicted about this project. On one hand, he admired Paul Newman and was keen to exorcise the ghosts that haunted him by constantly reminding the filmmaker of his perilous reputation as a bankable director. Directing a traditional Hollywood movie with a major star attached would lay those fears to rest. On the other hand, he knew he'd be creatively constricted as he'd be dealing with fiscally conservative producers, and worst of all, he'd be helming a sequel to a beloved hit. In the end, the pros outweighed the cons, and Scorsese agreed to a director-for-hire status. Both Scorsese and Newman took a hefty pay cut to meet the $14.5 million budget. In The Color of Money, we are reunited with Paul Newman's Fast Eddie, who's living a successful life as a liquor salesman in Chicago, having given up playing pool. However, when he encounters Vincent, a talented young pool player played by Tom Cruise, and his girlfriend Carmen, Eddie sees an opportunity for them to become a successful duo of hustlers. He convinces Vincent to join him on a road trip to hustle pool halls across the country with the ultimate goal of competing in a prestigious tournament in Atlantic City. As they travel, Eddie tries to teach Vincent the art of hustling, but Vincent's arrogance and showboating cause tension between the two. Eddie orchestrates a scheme for Vincent to throw a game against a renowned player, but Vincent's pride almost ruins their plan. Despite their disagreements, Eddie and Vincent eventually come to an understanding and form a partnership. The Color of Money is a very good movie, prevented from ever being seen as excellent due to its status as a sequel to a great motion picture. Paul Newman delivers a masterful performance as Fast Eddie, portraying the character with a mix of charm, vulnerability, and steely determination. His portrayal captures the essence of a man grappling with his past and striving for redemption, making Eddie a compelling and relatable protagonist. Tom Cruise also shines as the cocky and ambitious Vincent, bringing energy and charisma to the role. One of the film's strengths lies in its exploration of themes such as mentorship, ambition, and the pursuit of excellence. Through the characters of Eddie and Vincent, the film delves into the highs and lows of competitive sportsmanship as well as the moral ambiguity of hustling and gambling. This depth of character development adds layers of complexity to the story, elevating it beyond a mere sports drama. Visually, the film is stunning, with Scorsese's signature style evident in the dynamic camera work, stylish cinematography, and evocative use of light and color. The pool scenes are particularly impressive, capturing the tension and excitement of the games while showcasing the skill and athleticism of the players. Whilst not being a project Scorsese would have picked himself, the director showed his professionalism and ease with different genres. Newman's insistence also paid off as his second iteration as Fast Eddie earned him his only non-honorary Oscar. The movie proved to be Scorsese's biggest commercial hit to date, earning $52 million domestically when it opened in October 1986. No doubt that casting Tom Cruise, who'd starred in the year's biggest box office hit, Top Gun, released earlier that year, had a major influence on the movie's outcome. The title would end up earning 4 Oscar nominations, 1 win for Newman, and nods for the title's screenplay and art direction, along with the Best Supporting Actress nomination for Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio. Later that year, Martin Scorsese followed in the footsteps of his new Hollywood peers and helmed the music video. The 80s were MTV's heyday, and music videos were becoming pieces of art, luring in the most creative minds in the business. Tobe Hooper directed Billy Idol's post-apocalyptic video for Dancing with Myself. Brian De Palma collaborated with Bruce Springsteen in Dancing in the Dark. And Paul Schrader directed the Japan set clip for Bob Dylan's Tight Connection to My Heart whilst shooting Mishima in Japan. Scorsese then paired with the hottest artist of the 1980s, Michael Jackson, and helmed the video for Bad, the second single from the eponymous album. Jackson had successful collaborations with Hollywood directors in the past, first with John Landis, who directed the iconic music video for Thriller in 1982, and then Francis Ford Coppola with Captain EO. As 1986 came to an end, the filmmaker had just delivered the only movie in his career that came in under schedule and under budget, and was now associated with one of the biggest pop stars in the world. The stars aligned, and he would take this newfound mojo and his clout as a bankable director to finally get approval on one of the projects that had been brewing in his head since he started his career.
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only say.
Having proved he could deliver a box office hit and police himself when it came to budgets and schedules, Scorsese was approached by Universal Studios, which was interested in his long-gestating project, The Last Temptation of Christ. With a $7 million budget and a tight 2-month shooting schedule, Universal greenlit the production, with Scorsese signing up to direct a more mainstream title afterward. The movie's production was particularly challenging. Robert De Niro was no longer young enough to portray the role of Jesus Christ, nor did he ever show any inclination to take the role. Aidan Quinn passed on the role, and so did Scorsese's main picks for key roles. Singers Sting, Ray Davies, and Vanity all passed on the roles of Pontius Pilate, Judas Iscariot, and Mary Magdalene, respectively. The final cast consisted of William Dafoe as Jesus Christ, David Bowie as Pontius Pilate, Harvey Keitel as Judas, and Barbara Hershey as Mary Magdalene. The shooting itself was grueling due to the tight schedule and on-location shooting. Filming took place in various locations, including Morocco and Israel, which presented logistical challenges such as obtaining permits, navigating cultural sensitivities, and dealing with the practicalities of shooting in desert environments. In The Last Temptation of Christ, Jesus, a humble carpenter, grapples with his divine calling amidst the turmoil of his time. He is plagued by visions and premonitions, indicating God's special plan for him, and struggles with his identity as the Son of God. Wrestling with his own doubts and societal pressures, Jesus constructs crosses for Roman executions, sparking outrage among his peers, including Mary Magdalene. Despite his feelings for Mary, who has turned into prostitution, Jesus resists temptation and seeks solace in a monastic community where he discovers his extraordinary abilities. Meanwhile, Judas, a zealot rebel, recognizes Jesus' devotion to God and attempts to recruit him for the rebellion. Jesus, however, preaches a message of love and forgiveness, rejecting violence as the path to salvation. As he embarks on his ministry, Jesus challenges societal norms and gathers disciples uncertain of his role. As he faces crucifixion, Jesus is tempted by visions of a normal life, including marriage to Mary Magdalene. My opinion on this title, it's a difficult watch, and the final product is a personal take, namely Paul Schrader's, on a not-so-personal subject. Length and mediocre acting didn't help. Scorsese's other spiritual titles fared much better, and one can help but wonder if this was the right time to helm the project. The movie clearly states that it's not based on the four Gospels of the New Testament, but it shouldn't be based on Schrader's views either. The title can be described as something that falls somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Whilst it certainly carries weighty themes and offers a provocative exploration of the life of Jesus Christ, its execution may leave viewers feeling somewhat indifferent. On one hand, the film's commitment to delving into the complexities of Jesus' humanity, his internal struggles, and the moral dilemmas he faces is commendable. Director Martin Scorsese's bold vision and willingness to challenge traditional religious narratives are evident throughout the movie. On the other hand, despite these strengths, The Last Temptation of Christ may not fully deliver on its ambitious premise. Some viewers may find the pacing uneven or the narrative disjointed, making it difficult to fully engage with the story. Furthermore, the controversy surrounding the film's subject matter may overshadow its artistic merits for some audience members. The movie's release proved to be more troubled than its production. Boycotts, death threats against Scorsese, censorship, and bans unleashed a major backlash against the director. In France, a religious group set fire to the Saint-Michel cinema during a screening in October 1988. In Los Angeles, over 600 religious conservatives picketed the headquarters of MCA, the then owner of Universal Studios. The title did not perform exceptionally well commercially, earning $8 million domestically and $85 million overseas on a $7 million budget. Scorsese himself had discussed the challenges of making the film and the impact of the controversy surrounding it. Whilst he may have been disappointed by aspects of its reception, he also saw it as a significant and meaningful project in his career, and despite the controversy, he remained unfazed. The movie was nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards, recognizing Peter Gabriel's score and Barbara Hershey's performance, and earned a surprising Oscar nomination for Best Director, Scorsese's second. Barry Levinson, who helmed the year's highest-grossing title, Rain Man, took the prize, proving once again that box office matters. In 1989, the director collaborated with Francis Ford Coppola and Woody Allen in the anthology piece New York Stories, with Scorsese's entry being singled out as the movie's highlight. As a new decade dawned, Martin Scorsese's low-performing movies were undergoing a massive reappraisal. He had recovered from the King of Comedy fumble and didn't miss a beat when his passion project wasn't a hit. He was more confident, and as he was about to collaborate with Nicholas Pileggi, the future looked bright ahead.
I know I'd go from rags to riches if you would only save.
So did Scorsese manage to survive the 1980s? The answer is a resounding yes, though one could argue he didn't have much to recover from. Even his commercial flops, The King of Comedy and The Last Temptation of Christ, received strong reviews, and unlike Francis Ford Coppola, his track record was never truly damaged. The 1990s found the director reuniting with Robert De Niro and helming 2 back-to-back hits, the mafia epic Goodfellas and the remake of 1962's Cape Fear. The former earned the director awards at the 1991 BAFTAs, and at the 1991 edition of the Venice Film Festival. He was beaten by Kevin Costner and his revisionist western Dances with Wolves at the 63rd Academy Awards in the category for Best Director. The decade also found him helming two commercially lackluster but critically hailed titles: the period piece Age of Innocence and the gangster tale Casino. During the first half of the decade, Scorsese took on some minor acting roles. Martin Scorsese had always had cameos in most of his movies, most notably in 1976's Taxi Driver, where he played a key supporting role as a deranged passenger. In 1990, he played Vincent van Gogh in Akira Kurosawa's Dreams, and in 1994 he starred in the Best Picture nominee Quiz Show, directed by Robert Redford. He played the role of an executive and delivered the following iconic line.
See, the audience didn't tune in to watch some amazing display of intellectual ability. They just wanted to watch the money.
During the 1990s, the director's career went in the opposite direction than it did in the previous decade, starting with commercial yet personal titles and slowly moving to independent, more niche filmmaking, as showcased in the spiritual feature Kundun and the adaptation of Paul Schrader's script Bringing Out the Dead. None of the four titles Scorsese directed between 1993 and 1999 turned a profit, but unlike before, the Italian-American director remained unfazed. In 1997, he was the recipient of the AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. The new millennium kickstarted a new era for the filmmaker, and arguably his most successful period when it comes to accolades, but one that didn't come without its challenges. In 2000, the auteur managed to finally get his other passion project, Gangs of New York, greenlit. The movie would mark the first of many collaborations with the director's second muse, Leonardo DiCaprio. The production lasted a grueling 2 years, largely due to the infamous producer Harvey Weinstein's request to cut the film's length. Though the movie would earn Scorsese his first Golden Globe as a director and got a fourth Oscar nomination in the same category, the effects of the movie were almost critical. The movie did moderately well commercially, but left the director disheartened by the challenges and compromises he faced during its production. He considered quitting filmmaking due to the frustrations he encountered. Despite all of this, the iconic artist would later collaborate again with Harvey Weinstein as he took on the directorial duties for The Aviator, a project that was supposed to have been helmed by Michael Mann. Another modest performer, another collaboration with Leonardo DiCaprio, and a fifth Oscar nomination for Best Director, and a third loss against an actor-turned-director, with Clint Eastwood securing the win. Accolades poured in with his next title, The Departed. Brad Pitt had acquired the rights to the remake of the Hong Kong film Infernal Affairs. William Monahan was brought on board to pen the script. The final output impressed the director, who came on board along with the stellar cast. The result was a critical and commercially successful title, which 18 years after its release is still Scorsese's biggest earner. And on February 25, 2007, Martin Scorsese won his first Oscar, handed to him by his three peers and friends, and walked on stage as the excited crowd cheered loudly at the Kodak Theater. Warner Brothers, the studio behind the movie, approached Scorsese with the idea of directing the sequels. Executives at the studio had always envisioned The Departed as the first entry in a franchise, something that Scorsese never considered. He parted ways with the studio, feeling once again isolated from the industry he loved. The Oscar win was followed by a 4-year hiatus in which Scorsese continued to helm several non-feature projects, including documentaries and TV series, namely the highly successful HBO project Boardwalk Empire. The last 14 years were marked by Scorsese's introduction to a whole new audience and a string of titles that resonated with audiences and critics, even if the director's commercial track record remained choppy. Commercially successful titles like the psychological thriller Shutter Island and the pop culture staple Wolf of Wall Street were instrumental in turning the iconic artist into a household name for millennials and Gen Z. The likes of the 2011 Ode to Cinema, Hugo, the 2016 spiritual slow burner Silence, and 2019's crime epic The Irishman, which reunited Scorsese with Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel, and Robert De Niro, as well as a first-time collaboration with Al Pacino, were critically acclaimed, even if commercially unsuccessful. Just last year, Scorsese became the second most nominated director in Oscar history, earning his 10th nod for helming Killers of the Flower Moon. The director has since shown concerns about the time he has left and all the projects he probably won't be able to direct. But even at 81 years old, the iconic filmmaker has already lined up a range of projects he's interested in. Box office is no longer a concern, and fitting in continues to be irrelevant. And that's why the Italian-American filmmaker continues to inspire audiences and support young filmmakers. His reputation has crystallized to a standard that one would hope to achieve, knowing that's impossible. Forever dedicated to the world of cinema, Scorsese has headed for 30 years the Film Foundation, a non-profit film organization he started in 1990, which collaborates with film studios to restore prints of old or damaged movies. In 2007, the director founded the World Cinema Project to safeguard and showcase lesser-known films from regions often unable to preserve their own cinematic heritage. Recognition and approval came when he stopped looking for them. An inspiring story of an icon that has elevated the art of movie making. May he live long and turn into movies all those fantastic ideas, for there is always an audience for excellence. Here's looking forward to your next movies, Mr. Scorsese.